Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. I call to order the meeting of the Manassas Park Governing Body for March 16th, 2021. Per the General Assembly's approval of the Governor's amendments to the biennial budget, the governing body may now meet electronically without a quorum actually assembled in a single location, and without the in-person governing body members voting on the participation of those who are remoting in. The following benchmarks for the meeting this evening have been met. First, the governor has declared a state of emergency for the current COVID-19 pandemic in accordance with Code of Virginia. Second, the declared emergency makes it impractical or potentially unsafe for the governing body to assemble in a single location, and guidance from state and federal government support this determination. Therefore, the governing body will be meeting with various members participating electronically through GoToMeeting. Third, the meeting is to discuss or transact the business statutorily required or necessary to continue operations of the governing body. Fourth, the governing body will make available a recording or transcript of the meeting on its website in accordance with Code of Virginia. Fifth, notice has been and will continue to be provided to the public using the available methods. Lastly, we have made and will continue to make arrangements for public access through electronic means, including the ability to comment. Those participating electronically are Councilmember Hasib Javed, Councilmember Darrell Moore, and Vice Mayor Banks. Those participating in person are Councilmember Alana Mensing, Councilmember Yessi Amaya, Councilmember Laura Hampton, and Mayor Jeanette Rischel. Okay, please join us in a moment of silence. And Councilmember Mensing, would you lead us in the pledge? Oh, I'm sorry. Forgive me, we need to approve the agenda. Pardon me. It helps to look at the agenda when you're actually conducting a meeting. Are there any changes or additions to the agenda? Okay. See you.
The agenda.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Aye.
Okay. Opposed, abstained, motion carries. Now we have our moment of silence. Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Do we have anyone signed up to make public comment? Is there anyone signed up over there, Laszlo, that we know of?
I don't see it.
Okay. Have we received any comments via email or text or phone call? Okay. Seeing no one and hearing none, we will move on to our public hearing. We'll move on to 3A. Item 3A is a public hearing for a zoning ordinance text amendment for off-street parking when enlarging residential dwellings. I declare the public hearing open. We have a presentation. Hi, Mickey.
Hi. Good evening, Mayor and governing body members. For the record, I am Michelle Berry, the Planning and Zoning Administrator for the city. What we have before you today is an amendment to our parking regulations. In the fall and during this January, the governing body held 2 work sessions on parking. One of the issues staff identified to try to alleviate some of the parking issues and provide sufficient parking was that our current zoning ordinance exempts parking regulations or any parking requirements for additions to single-family homes. So what you have on your lot is what you can provide. Now there's concern since several of the homes on the west side have put on second-story additions or very large additions in the rear. This amendment, which now exempts additions for the parking requirements, would require that the parking be met for single-family residences when an addition is 10% or more of the gross floor area of the dwelling. So that would require that the applicant who comes in for the addition demonstrate that they have the ability to park 2 cars, which is the space dimensions are about 9 by 18 on their property. And just to note that we do have a restriction about paving in the front yard. Typically, especially on the west side, it's 20 feet in width. It's either 20 feet in width or 20% of the width of the lot, whichever is greater. So they would either have to accommodate that parking in that driveway, or they can extend any kind of pavement or driveway in the side and the rear. Also noted is that driveways under our ordinance only count for half a space, so that would have to also be accommodated and calculated when they bring forth their addition plan. So we're going to, as part of the zoning review, ensure that now additions can accommodate 2 vehicle spaces on their property. The Planning Commission did hold their public hearing in February, and they recommended approval of this zoning ordinance text amendment. That's really just a brief summary, so I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Mickey. Okay, let's start with Councilmember Amaya. Do you have any comments or questions?
I know that we had discussed the 10% before. Would that be included for porches, patios, and decks?
No, that's an excellent question. There is a specific definition for gross floor area under the parking regulations, and it does exempt stairwells, hallways, restrooms, and storage space. And typically for the definition of gross floor area, it's enclosed space, so all of those that you mentioned would not be deemed gross floor area.
Okay, thank you. That was it.
Okay, Councilmember Mensing?
No questions.
Okay, I have no questions. Councilmember Hampton?
Yes, I got a quick question. I have my glasses on. Regarding number 5, and it talks about the original as-built area. So if there's already an extension on there, and let's say someone adds another extension onto the house, does that only include the original house, like a Cape Cod, or is it now the first addition?
Well, whatever they are coming in for, so if whatever new application they have, if it's 10% of, well, it would be okay, now I understand what you're saying. What is 10% if there are additions upon? I'll defer to Dean, but I'm assuming it means the existing floor area of the property, but, can you answer that, please?
And so what happens is you go back to the original floor plan. So if they come in for an addition of say 8%, they come in later another time for 7%, the total is 15%. So they would then trigger the requirement. Now, if they've already triggered the requirement once, they're not going to trigger it again. They're still just required to meet the requirement in the code. So we go back to the original design of the house. That answers your question?
Yeah. Yes, it does.
Follow up or anything?
No.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Moore?
No additional questions. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Javed?
Hey, good evening, everybody. Yeah, I just have a few comments. I guess my concern is some of these driveways are already limited in how you can expand. So my question is basically meaning like if the homeowner had an opportunity to expand a driveway, where do you think they would have already done so to alleviate parking space? So, I mean, I don't understand why adding additional square footage would require additional parking space. And some of these houses will have no space to expand their driveways. I just don't see, I guess, the correlation between those two.
Yeah, so I think the evidence is in the history of development in our city where there have been additions without the additions of driveways when they were feasible, and therefore people are just taking advantage of the public right-of-way to park their cars instead of having to incur the cost of building out driveways. that's one of the major drivers of why we have parking shortages on the west side. So this is an attempt, even though kind of history's already happened and we can't go back in time and fix it, we've at least decided that going forward, we would like a more sensible policy to help alleviate or not create additional parking burdens.
Right, no, I'm saying like, say if I have a driveway that only occupies one vehicle, and I have two vehicles, I would go out my way to expand my driveway if I was able to.
I think you would, but
Some of these houses are
yeah.
so limited that you cannot expand it.
Yeah.
Even if someone wants to add an addition, some houses don't even have a space to add a second vehicle on that driveway. So you're telling me that they won't be able to make any type of renovations to their house?
Yes, there's two points there. So in the first one, there's an assumption that everyone would build that extra driveway space for their second vehicle. But again, that's not what's happening. So they're just parking on the street. I think your second point, that's correct. That's kind of a policy decision of the governing body is what's the bigger priority right now? What's the bigger concern? Because you're right, there may be some properties where additions of driveways or garages may not be feasible, but essentially what we're stating here is that we have a policy challenge with the lack of parking, especially on the west side of the city, because of prior additions done to those 1950 designs, additions being done without additional parking capacity being built. So we're saying we want to correct that. And I don't know if there's any exemptions for where they can't build driveways, but I would assume there would not be. Or
Yeah, I mean, even the only mechanism they would have is a variance, but they would have to demonstrate a hardship. I suppose if there is, I mean, that could be a valid application if there were some type of land, if the property was designed as such, or there was some type of grading issue where they couldn't do that, a variance would be something that the BZA could review based on that information and make a decision. But it can't be a self-imposed hardship, just to say they don't want to build an extra space, but if there are challenges on that property where it would preclude them from doing so, that would be a valid variance application that they could proceed with.
Okay. So
I don't think it's a small percentage either. I think there's a big percentage of where it's not even feasible. And I don't think this encompasses the whole community, basically. Doesn't really, only encompasses a certain portion of that community. The people that are able to add the additional driveway. My second point I was going to say is that these additions not necessarily means that you're adding more occupancy to the house, right? So if it was a bedroom, a legal bedroom, okay, that makes sense. But if you're adding, like I brought this to that point up last time, if you're expanding a family room, but you still have the same occupancy living in the house with one vehicle, now you're requiring them to add an additional parking space for a vehicle that they don't have.
Well, I would add, it's just not necessarily for the existing occupants. That family who's living there now may have just one vehicle, but certainly a property is sold and new or maybe rented where tenants come in and have additional vehicles and family members. So you're right you're correct in that instance if they do have one vehicle, but properties do change hands and the family makeup does change, and so this would try to address that situation as well.
But expanding a family room, even if you exchange to a next owner, the bedrooms are still the same amount of bedrooms in the house. Yeah. We're not adding an extra bedroom in the house.
How do you know the family room won't be used as a bedroom in the future?
Exactly.
No, I could knock down the wall, right, and do another 120 square feet on my family room, right? It's part of the family room, like a living room space. It's not a bedroom size, so I don't see anybody living in a living room space. Legally, they can't, right? So I think that if the house is adding a legal bedroom, that instead of 2-bedroom house, now they have a 3 to 4-bedroom house, this makes sense. But adding a 10% of the square footage, even if they want to just do a simple enlargement of a family room, of a attic space or something, or maybe make a bathroom bigger, right? That would fall under this proposal here.
No, bathrooms are excluded, right?
It wasn't part, it was excluded in your definition. Bathrooms, hallways.
Yes.
The bathrooms should be included in the taxing living area. Anything above ground that's not part of storage is considered living square foot.
Yeah, but we read the exemptions per current ordinance and it includes bathrooms.
Perhaps city attorney could review for all of us the basis of the 10%. Could you do that, Dean? Thank you.
So right now, any other type of dwelling or any other type of building in the city that expands by 10% or more is subject to the new requirements. So that's why the original code, if you'll note in the red line version, it just said except for residences. And so there was desire to no longer exempt them from this requirement. So that's all that this is. The 10% is the standard that's used throughout the local area. It's used in our ordinance for other types of structures as well. So that's why we use 10%.
Thank you, Dean. Thank you. And I think there's a concern that some very, very large homes have gone up over on the west side. Lots of people may be living, they may sell the home, as Mickey indicated, and it will come under a different use in the future. We don't know how many people would move into that home. Do you have a follow-up, Councilmember Javed?
No follow-up, but I mean, I agree that that couple of houses that are expanding, but they're adding, like I said before, they're adding bedrooms, right? But the 10% that's in this proposal encompasses any type of enlargement and renovation, which necessarily does not mean that you're adding another bedroom or a tenant can occupy that space as a living dwelling.
No, I understand what you're saying.
I just don't see it.
Yeah. No, I think we understand where you're going with that, but there's no guarantee that the family room addition would not be used as a bedroom. Excuse me, go ahead.
I just, staff is happy to maybe track this and determine whether or not parking is going to be a problem on these residents when they come into additions, and we can attempt to track whether or not the parking is precluding them from doing the additions, and then maybe come back and review it with you if that is demonstrated as a problem.
And you can issue a variance if there's some kind of a terrain problem. Yeah, okay.
Well, it'd have to go before the BZA as an application for approval, but that would be a remedy.
Okay. This seemed to be the low-hanging fruit that we could try to alleviate parking, or at least not have it get any worse. So, Vice Mayor Banks, do you have any comments or questions?
Hi. Thanks, Mickey. I'm just following up on Councilmember Javed's question and concern. Is there any? So we do allow for variance, but they have to go before the board to get that approval.
I'm sorry, you faded out a bit when you were speaking. Were you talking about the variance?
Yes. So they're allowed to, they can, if, for instance, someone expands their living room or their bathroom, like Councilmember Javed mentioned as examples, they can always apply for a variance, right?
Well, I'll have Dean bolster me in this, because you have to have some type of hardship, and which usually is related to the land, such as the grade or whatnot, and I'll have Dean expand on that a bit more.
Yeah, and it can't be something you've done to yourself, and it has to basically be rise to the level of a taking. So if you understand what a governmental taking is, this would be a regulatory taking. It would rise to the level of regulatory taking if it was otherwise done. Okay, and that's kind of the standard they have to use. So they can't just randomly say, okay, we like you, we're just gonna go ahead and issue a variance. A lot of people think it's the way to get around a zoning ordinance requirement, which is not. It has to be something very unique about that property, like maybe it's an odd shape, or as Mickey stated before, maybe it's got some steep slopes that prevent you from doing something on that site. There's gotta be something unique about it, and it can't be of your own making.
Okay, thank you, Dean.
And there's no way we can tweak the requirements for a variance, right?
The requirements for a variance actually come from the state. It's not a local option. Yeah, we're stuck with what the state has allowed us to do. There's been a lot of case law on variances as well.
Okay. I read the ordinance, it's existing structure. What if that includes like a deck, like an enclosed, a sunroom, or an enclosed deck? I mean, does that count as the 10%?
Well, words matter in how you define these items. I mean, when you mean enclosed, if it's not fully enclosed, if it has open air, I would not consider that gross floor area, even if it did have a roof. So I would not count that. But if it was a full walled addition, then that does count for gross floor area. You have to look at how they're proposing that structure to really determine how it's defined and what materials they're using. If it's mostly screens, then I would not deem that to be gross floor area.
Yeah, my only concern is that it doesn't allow for exceptions. I mean, I get the assumption that, yes, in living room size or increased basement can possibly be used for someone to dwell in or stay in. But there's always exceptions. We've kind of learned that through our rules. So there's always an exception, or someone comes up with something that they need an exception for. And this doesn't kind of allow for that flexibility for those types of anomalous or deviant cases where someone might expand something that's not used for dwelling. Is there any way, can we put in some type of acceptive language in there to allow for those types of unique cases?
That's a Dean question.
Yeah, so we have the exemptions already listed. So I don't know if we can add to those exemptions, anything else we can think about, but there's actual exemptions like the bathrooms, the decks and other areas.
It also has to have legal foundation to it, hence the 10%, right?
So I think we would be looking at going to the Virginia Unified Statewide Building Code, which defines a living area. And so outside of the zoning ordinance, that's how we deal with overcrowding, is if there are too many people per area. I think we ought to stick with that concept, and because we start just making it up as we go along, I think we're gonna have some serious problems in enforcing.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point, but you're right. And my final question is, should we put in language about, I know parking in backyards is another big issue on the west side. And we mentioned the driveway and paved surface. Would it be kind of redundant, or I'm just thinking out loud? Can we put in language saying that parking in backyards is prohibitive or prohibited?
Right. Well, I guess
You're saying paved.
Unpaved areas is what you mean? Or just forbidding any kind of parking in the rear, whether it's on a paved surface. We do have a lot of people who do extend their driveways in the rear yard to accommodate their vehicles because they have several. And they come in because they have parking challenges. And we do have a lot of people coming in wanting to expand their driveway for those purposes. So I would hesitate to actually ban parking in the rear yard, especially on a paved surface. We don't really allow that.
Aren't we talking about two different issues here? One, yeah.
Well, I was trying to get clarification as to what the discussion was about. That's why whether it's paved surface or not is an important distinction.
Sorry, I was thinking out loud. Just on unsurfaced backyard, because what I picture is someone building a big house and parking their vehicles in the backyard because no one can see it off the street, except for the houses behind them.
Right.
On the side.
I mean, we would have a challenge in enforcing that anyway, because we can't, unless we can see it from the street, or if somebody, invites us on their adjacent property where we can see it in plain view, that's when the enforcement mechanism can start, where we could actually issue that notice of violation for that. So,
All right, no other questions, thanks.
Okay, thank you, Preston. Are there any other questions from the governing body or comments? Okay. Moving on to public comment, I believe Mr. Donald Shoemaker is signed up to make comment. Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you so much. I promise I won't speak more than 3 minutes. You won't let me. I will say thank you for entertaining this proposal. This was actually my idea from the town hall we had back in September, based on a major remodel where they, on Manassas Drive, it's not a remodel, they literally leveled the property down to the only thing that was there was cement. And they only put, I believe, one spot in the driveway. And I think they added a 1-car garage, which under our zoning ordinance only counts as half a space, but the house is probably 3 or 4 times the original structure. And so I really feel like this is an important proposal. And so I'm asking all 7 of you to say yes to this, because I think we can't make the problem worse than what it already is. And that's kind of what this proposal I had in mind when I brought the idea up, was that, at least don't make it worse. Even if we're working on the solutions to make it better, doesn't cost us anything. Doesn't require us to set up a system of parking enforcement or anything like that. We can do that for other issues, but this definitely prevents that. There is major redevelopment on the west side, but I will tell you, I just reached out to the zoning administrator a few weeks ago as I was perusing MLS, because I am a licensed realtor. I saw a house on Laurie, I believe it was on Laurie, in Bloom's Crossing, with 2 full distinct kitchens. So there were 2 families living there. Obviously, there was a regular kitchen, and then there was a full kitchen in the basement. There wasn't a wet bar. I mean, it had a stove, a refrigerator, a dishwasher. It had the whole bit. And so if we think that this is only a west side problem, it's not. It's an all of the city kind of problem. When I moved into my townhouse, I didn't know this. There were 12 people living in a 3-bedroom townhouse next to me. So this is not just I just want to clarify that this is not just a west side problem. This is an all city problem. And, so that I encourage all of you, please, tweak whatever you need to, whatever you base the 10% on. My only question I think I got answered was whether the 10% essentially is on the original structure, or is it, something was added in the 1980s, so it went from 1,000 feet to 1,300 feet, and now they want to add, 400 more. Where is it on the 1,300 because that's now what exists, or what the other was originally? So, but thank you for considering this proposal, and I ask for you to approve it.
Thank you. And perhaps Dean can address your question.
I was just going to tell him he's getting close to his 3 minutes.
I thought you were on your way up to answer it. Okay.
Well, but I will just point out that if you pass this, it's effective now. So we're not going to go back to 1980 when they were expanding it and now make them, go back to before 1980 to the original. We're going to go to whatever it is right now, moving forward. mean, I don't think it's fair to go all the way back. So, I don't know if that answers his question.
Right, so you're gonna just take whatever is now there is now the base.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. I mean, you can't pass a law and then say, okay, we're gonna reach back 20 years and, enforce it against you. It's on this point forward.
10% of the original on the west side would only be 90 or 100 square feet. Effectively, everything would have to require additional parking, right?
Well, not necessarily, because a lot of those houses already have the sufficient parking. It's just the ones that don't have any parking on site at all. Okay, so, this here just makes them conform to the current regulations. Doesn't add any additional requirement to them other than that. Now, the governing body may choose to do something else and require additional, if you have so much additional living space, you have another space you have to put in there. That's something else. This is just the low-hanging fruit, as the mayor said, just to make sure that those properties over there that don't have any on-site parking are going to now have to conform with that before they can expand, thereby not making the problem worse.
Thank you. Thank you, Dean. Is there anyone who has not signed up to make public? Excuse me?
Oh, sorry, after the public comment time, I have one more comment.
Oh, yes, go right ahead.
The way this ordinance is written, it doesn't include basements, unfinished basements, or did I read it wrong?
Anything underground is not considered gross floor area. Basements are specifically excluded.
Well, they could technically finish the basement out, and then as a shoemaker stated, put in the second kitchen in there, and they would not be required to do an extra parking.
Well, they can't put an extra kitchen in there legally. That's not permitted. That would be 2 dwellings in one unit, and that's not permitted.
Well, either way, I mean, they could rent out the space, right? The people rent out their basements.
Yes, you can rent out your basement, but it can't be its own self-contained dwelling unit.
If you finish the basement and, sorry to cut you off, Mickey, I didn't mean to.
Okay. I was just gonna say that, we don't want to preclude people from improving their house with the existing square footage. Donald kind of brought in a very important concern, which is overcrowding and multiple family dwellings. I mean, this ordinance does not really address that, but these two issues do complement each other. But again, it's really the focus of just trying to have properties that don't meet the current parking requirement of 2 spaces for single-family detached units, that if they're going to expand by 10% or more, to just bring them up to current code.
Right, so with that said, I mean, you see where my dilemma is, right? So people could finish out their basement, rent it out, and not subject to expand their driveway, while someone that wants to expand a living room is subject to expanding a driveway.
Well, that's correct, but it's already existing space in the dwelling unit, so I do see a distinction between the two.
Thank you. That'll be it for me tonight.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone who had not signed up to make public comment, but anyone in the audience who feels moved to make public comment, please come forward. Okay. Then do we have a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed, abstained, motion carries. Our vote usually follows at the next regularly scheduled meeting, which would be April 6th. Is that correct? Okay, thank you very much, Mickey. Thank you. Okay, and next we have Information Technology Master Plan presentation.
check with David and Tom. Are you both on? And can we up? I got you both. Can you hear, see well?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me okay?
We can. And David, I believe, I talked to city manager. We're going to share our ability for you to present. So I'm going to go ahead and make you the presenter, and you can bring up the same slide presentation that we have provided here in the city. So let me know if you are able to share.
Okay.
This is a test for the technology master plan. There, so we're all right.
Well, I'm glad it worked.
Yeah, there you go. So while that's getting brought up, good evening, Mayor, members of the governing body. I'm Chris Himes. If I haven't formally met you, I'm the Assistant City Manager for Administration. And today I have David Kraut and Tom Jacobson. They are the two consultants that have been working exclusively with the city pretty much since the onset of the green light of the project last spring, roughly late winter of 2020, and developing and helping the implementation as far as the kind of scope of work and building out our 5 to 7 year roughly capital kind of based IT master plan for the city. It was one just based off of a needs assessment for kind of the assumptions that we had of addressing our needs, our lack of kind of a plan in place to procure new kind of governmental technologies to help, enhance service delivery in our city and address some of our core hardware type networking, cybersecurity type needs here in the city, coming up with a pretty solid plan. And this is the compilation of all of the effort of not only their time helping out the city, but also city staff. We had robust participation across all departments, and this report, proud to say, is an indication of everyone's participation in this project. So this is just the actual slide presentation, but I do believe in the governing body packet, there's that roughly almost 200-page PDF file for the entire technology master plan report, available to the public as well as the governing body members, and we can have a robust discussion on any questions that you might have after the presentation. But I would encourage to hold questions until the very end of that. And without further ado, Tom or David, I'm not sure who's starting. You have the floor.
I'm gonna get her started, and we'll kind of go back and forth here a little bit. So, Mayor and council members, appreciate the opportunity to present this really important project to you and to be a part of it. And let's just go through. So just from introductions, we'll just spend a minute and a half on us and the company, just so you understand who you are. I'm a CPA originally, started doing technology consulting back in the 90s with municipalities doing ERP type consulting. We started Client First 17 years ago. And so I've been doing these types of projects pretty much every day ever since. And technology master planning, as well as working with departments on major application systems and business process reviews and projects like that.
And I'm Tom Jacobson. I'm a partner at Client First, and I'm responsible for the IT infrastructure, cybersecurity, and GIS practices within the firm. Oh, and I've been doing this a long time too.
So just real quick, just seconds on these slides. So just so you understand, all we do is work with local government agencies. It's predominantly with municipalities. If you're wondering what the gray state there is, it's the only state someone on our management team has not done a project in. So we do work coast to coast. We've worked with over 500 U.S. local government agencies, over 2,500 projects. We've done this particular project over 100 times with municipalities. All right, a little bit on methodology, kind of a high level approach. I'll just make some key points. So one of the things that we did initially in the first phase to start off was to set up stakeholder teams within each department, and we included a cross-function of users at different levels within each department. Different folks use different systems and technology in different ways, and we wanted this project to be very collaborative and get input. I don't know what the exact number is, but it's certainly more than 50 people in the organization, probably in the neighborhood of 70 that participated in this project. Our assessment with the department started out with information requests and questionnaires to get at the type, all the applications and systems they're using,
some of their challenges, examples of manual or inefficient processes that they were hoping to automate through technology, citizen services and transparency type initiatives, and citizen communications. So after gathering all that information, then we did a workshop with each individual department, and that was really in order for us to get the baseline for the assessment of where you're at on different technologies and where you want to go and need to go. The third phase is really our research and putting together those different initiative and project descriptions that you saw in the report, and options and recommendations. And then we worked on some different workshops with project team committees and executive management to refine initiatives and resources and budgets and priorities to ultimately get to the point where we are today, which is final presentation of this plan report. You want to talk about this assessment?
Yeah, I'll start off here. Strengths at the City of Manassas Park. The IT staff is well respected and committed to their jobs. They work long hours and I think do an excellent job. Server infrastructure is in good shape and up to date, and recent CARES Act funding has allowed the city to really jumpstart several of the projects that are highlighted in our assessment as necessary. That includes geographic information system improvements, website replacement, land management, which is permits and things like that. Work orders, Office 365, which is moving off of an old out-of-date Exchange server, and then desktop upgrades to the current Windows operating system. It's good that the CARES Act money came through. In the prior 3 years, the city had, according to our benchmark, the city had underspent on technology. Our benchmark, as David said earlier, we work solely with local government agencies. So our benchmarks are more than 50 local government agencies of approximately your size, and their spending habits over prior years. So these are not, grand schemes. We're not comparing you to Washington, D.C. or anybody like that. We're comparing you to folks that are just like you. So we've been underspending for the last few years, and I think the report and the budgets in the report will reflect that.
Some of our major findings, and these are just sort of highlights, a couple of them, you need several new application systems, but two of the most significant ones, the Enterprise Resource Planning, or ERP, which is your finance, payroll, HR, also your tax and revenue type systems, as well as the public safety, CAD and records management systems. These are also 2, 3, if you want to think of it that way, of the most complex, most expensive, farthest reaching systems that you will deal with in any technology plan. And we highlighted, this is a technology plan, so it's not a business process review. We've not done specifications for these systems, but in the report, we gave you feedback samples from staff. There's actually 115 examples of improvements that they would like to see in the ERP system, just to give you a flavor for that. And the CAD RMS is really toward its end of life, and there's a lot of benefits to implementing a new CAD RMS system, and something that you'll need to do is support wanes. And also what you should expect, and if you looked at the staff feedback, you'll see that there's a lot of manual process, a lot of workarounds, a lot of use of Excel. And so the city should see significant improvements to internal processes and timeliness, and improved reporting, as well as constituent service. Other key findings, the website with improvements there. We'll have a lot more interaction with your residents, things like applications, online payments, access to information 24/7 without always having to come to the counters, ability for them to report issues and get quicker information to Public Works or other departments. And also staff training, which is very common. a lot of these systems, they need ongoing training. Systems change, people change positions, they change departments, new people are coming and going, and so training is something that needs to be ongoing for most of these systems.
As we talked about briefly above, the geographical information system is being improved as we speak. Pretty much all the departments of the city expressed interest in GIS improvements. GIS is important to, I think, the obvious folks, police, fire, public works, but it's also important to Parks and Rec because they deal with both, physical spaces and the equipment on park property, community development, treasurer with property, those kinds of things. So really, GIS is important to pretty much every department in the community. The IT infrastructure, as I said, is basically sound. One of the key points of cybersecurity defense is resiliency. The ability to recover should an event strike that's I guess, unfortunate, we'll call it. So one of the things we'd like the city to emphasize going forward is disaster recovery planning and additional resiliency in the data network and internet connectivity. This becomes more and more important as the city moves towards cloud applications. Many of the core infrastructure systems, including the network switching, the file servers, those kinds of things need to be replaced over the next 3 years. That again increases budgets during those periods. And there's operational systems that IT folks need to focus on a bit: inventory, monitoring, alerts, alarms, auditing tools. The last bullet talks about cybersecurity best practices. There are several things that are inexpensive to purchase, but take a good deal of staff time to implement, just to coordinate with other staff and to help them through the process of moving to things like, to multi-factor authentication and other things like that. So there may not be high budget items, but there are high resource intensive items. I mentioned our benchmarks before. We gather these benchmark measurements for all kinds of things. And here we're looking at employees per staff for IT staff and computers for IT staff. In both of these cases, the city has fewer IT staff than would be typical. And David, if you would flip to the next slide. It's really, really easy to see that in the best practice goal of percentage of help desk tickets open more than 7 days. The goal is 20%, and in Manassas Park, when we did our surveys, it's at 82%. Help desk tickets open too long. Actually, the issue with that is they decrease productivity for other staff, and they reduce responsiveness to both, elected officials and residents. So I think that's what we're showing here is the need for additional staff to just maintain the desktop environment, the help desk, and to move forward on the projects outlined in the plan.
All right. Some of our key recommendations we just wanted to highlight. Again, I spoke of the new ERP system. This is just a visual of the different components that are often referred to in a municipality. The core of, say, financial, accounting, payroll, HR, utility billing are often, as well as procurement, are often a single vendor in an agency of your size. Things like tax and work orders, asset management, community development apps like permits are sometimes, there are some vendors that provide all these things, and sometimes those are things that are provided by different types of vendors. Really, I guess one of the major things to think about is that this level of ERP and these number of modules, if you will, that I was showing is really about a 3-year process. You need assessment and procurement time, which would include process reviews, detailed feature function requirements, a competitive RFP to multiple software vendors, due diligence, contract negotiations, and then at least 2 years to implement that. Additionally, your property tax and revenue systems, both of these core systems, there is just a tremendous amount of manual processing, paper, and shadow systems like Excel involved. And we also mentioned the CAD RMS and the mobile computers in squad cars. These are typical components of those systems, and that's another major system that needs replacement. In regards to online services, I mean, improvements as far as online payments or applications such as permits and payments and renewals and other types of forms that will integrate into some of these back-end systems will improve internal processes, save labor across the organization, as well as speed up and improve citizen services.
We talk about GIS quite a bit. We believe it's a basic core strategy for municipalities because it holds all your geospatial assets. And these application systems that the city is currently implementing and those to be implemented in the future all have interfaces to the GIS system for the geospatial assets to track them and to relate to them. Those interfaces are very important to implement as a part of new systems because they relate the geospatial asset and changes in that to the work being done on those assets. I think that that's a key point that we wanted to make sure we emphasize. Okay, infrastructure priorities. Staff's currently working on Windows 10 upgrades and Office 365, as we mentioned before. High priority recommendations moving forward is the control systems for water. The network equipment is aging and actually out of date. Several cybersecurity recommendations. Resiliency, as we talked about, offsite backups, and an email archiver system to increase the efficiency of FOIA responses. We talked about IT operations applications. The goal of implementing IT operations tools is to move from a reactive environment where staff call the IT folks and say, hey, this is broken, to the IT folks knowing ahead of time when they come in the morning or whatever that something's broken. So to move from a reactive to a proactive stance, that's the goal, and to improve efficiency. Can you imagine, without an inventory system, you have to go to every workstation, take a look at it, figure out what version it is, all those kinds of things. With the inventory system, it all happens automatically, and it's updated automatically. So those two are key things. We're trying to keep IT operational costs down by implementing efficiency tools, just like you would in any other department. One of the things we recommend the city do is develop a long-range replacement plan. It's often called a sustainability plan to keep track of assets that may only need to be replaced every 5, 7, or in some cases 15 years. And to budget for those ahead of time so that the city's not seeing big spikes in budgeting going forward. So starting with a server infrastructure replacement in 2022, there's several large cost items of 22, 23, and 24 in the forecast budget. One of the things we talked about was a cybersecurity initiative every quarter. There's a lot going on in the world of cybersecurity. Over the last 2 weeks alone, not necessarily our clients, but folks that we know in the industry, and 3 different folks have been attacked in 3 different ways, and one of which has been just really, really costly to the agency, will result in significant downtime for their entire police department. Spending money on cybersecurity is money well spent to prevent those kinds of risks. It's an insurance policy. Next slide. As we talked about before, metrics indicate an understaffed technology department. We recommend adding a dedicated help desk technician. We're a big fan of developing career paths for technology people and expanding job descriptions, not only for the positions that they have today, but the positions that we hope they grow into. So we would recommend doing that. Then in the future, as the city expands use of these various new applications and implements them, consider funding a separate business analysis analyst position. That position, the goal of that position would be to help the departments become more efficient through improving their business processes. David mentioned there are lots of shadow systems, spreadsheets, and paper processes outside of the current application systems. As the new systems are implemented, hopefully the majority of those will be put into the system and automated. But there'll still be a whole lot more left to do. And having someone focused on keeping these tools up to date and helping the departments move forward is going to be key to continuing to improve as an agency and continuing to be able to offer more services to your residents at a reasonable cost. Next slide. This is the current IT organization. Actually, since we started working on this project, a part-time help desk technician has been added to the team. This is what I recommended for next fiscal year, is to add a IT technician position, which is really a help desk position, and retain the part-time help desk. I think it gives the city additional flexibility for vacations and coverage and special projects and documentation at really a nominal expense. So that would be for the next fiscal year. And then years 3 or 4 of the plan, we would recommend adding a business systems analyst. And as you can see, the box, David's got the arrow on it right there. Again, that's to help with the CAD, RMS, ERP systems, and then really driving efficiencies into work orders, land management, all the systems at the city. Onward, budgets. Here's a 7-year budget summarized by categories. Best practices are primarily standard operating procedures or things that a typical IT department would do in a way that's successful the majority of the time. I think the funding and the best practices line item is actually ongoing user training. And that's really, I would call it more touch-up training to keep for new employees, security awareness training, some other kinds of trainings, not specific to new applications and implementations. There's always new things to learn about technology. And a little bit of funding every year to do that is helpful. I think you can see this slide and then the following slides that Departmental Application Systems expand a great deal in fiscal years 23, 24, and 25. Smart cities, we've developed a smart city category a couple of years ago, and those are really about online services to your residents and expanding their capabilities to your residents. So that's funding for specific things related to resident services. I think infrastructure operations, we talked about the remainder of those. We actually started, when we started working on this project with city staff, we started with a 5-year plan. And the 5-year plan just wasn't functional at sustainable for budgets. So then we worked together to reprioritize and create a 7-year plan. David, this graph shows the prior 3 years spending. In the middle are the benchmarks, yellow, blue, and green is the high benchmark. Folks at the high benchmark have application development people on staff. That's really where the difference is. And most of organizations your size do not have that. And then the 7-year plan. And I'll show you a little bit more about how that breaks out before. But you can kind of see how that all fits. Here you go. I recommend the prior 3 years budget is in red on the left. Fiscal year 2021 actually is a little bit lower. And then in the middle, it raises up in 22, 23, 24. And that's actually where you're playing catch up. And you're really spending a little bit more money than you would typically, but it's to make up for prior underspending. Next slide. What we're showing here is the dark blue is departmental applications focus. That's really the key. The kind of light green is infrastructure. Departmental application spending is about 2 to 1 to IT infrastructure spending. That's reasonable. The goal isn't to actually run a great network. The goal is to give staff applications that improve their day-to-day performance. So that's really what we're about. That's why spending money on applications is the way to do this. Next slide. What we're showing here is the red and dark blue are high critical and high priority projects over the life of the plan. Gray, and then there's actually very few low priority projects in the plan. But what we're showing here is the majority of the spending that we've recommended as a part of this plan is either critical or high priority to the city. This is not a Cadillac plan by any stretch of the imagination. There aren't any fancy dancy toys in here at all. And we really do work in a business focused way. We don't recommend technology for technology's sake. The point of technology, as we talk about, is to help staff become more efficient and improve resident services. So that's the goal here, and that's where we're focused.
Thank you very much.
Wrap up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Was he not done?
No, he asked if there's any questions.
Okay. Thank you very much. Unfortunately, the Technology Master Plan report was not put on the website until the afternoon, so we haven't had a chance to look at it. After we do have a chance to look at it, do you have a specific turn time you would prefer us to get back to you by a certain time?
Oh, any time.
Comments, questions?
Yeah.
2 weeks, a month?
A month is fine. Really, this is your plan, so it's supposed to guide us. And so when you see recommendations coming in the CIP and in budgets, it's going to be driven by this, or any new initiatives, it's driven by this. So think of this as kind of an ongoing user guide for us that we can keep referencing back to, and you can feel free to take as much time as you need to go through it and email us questions, and we'll certainly get back to you on that. Yeah.
All right, we'll start here with questions. Councilmember Hampton.
Yep. I have a laundry list, but I'm not going to go through them tonight. I figure these poor people would like to go home before midnight, so. So my first question was regarding the proposal for the dollar amounts. So was that built around a specific ERP system in mind, or was that built around case studies with other like divisions? So what's the background? How was that number? How were those numbers generated? That's in essence my question.
Yeah, David, I'll go ahead and let you, since you provided the actual benchmark range, and then I can add some context to that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So the budget, we try to do a range of budgets on most of those initiatives, which is kind of a high and a low. And we do a lot of ERP type consulting. Well, a lot of these different types of systems, not all of them. We are vendor agnostic. We believe in competitive RFP, detailed requirements definitions, real process reviews. So we typically in ERP, as an example, have at least a handful of those types of projects going on where we're either helping cities procure them, representing them, and or helping them implement from a project management assistance perspective. So we just have a tremendous amount of experience and typically look at all the pieces and parts, the modules, if you will, your size of agency, level of complexity, determine what that budget range is. And that's how we come up with a target budget for a project.
Okay.
And it's also highly dependent on the size of the jurisdiction. Most software providers, because it's an ERP or a small scale platform, their first question is, what's the size of your jurisdiction? And that's usually the number one driver of scale cost. For us, they mentioned in the presentation due diligence on our end, that is reaching out to almost every single like-sized jurisdiction in Virginia, specifically around cities, just because they offer the robust amount of services that we do. So that would entail pretty much every jurisdiction, probably less than like 50,000 in population range, probably no less than 10, because usually those cities tend to have very minimal amount of services they provide. They probably partner a lot with counties. And I think that probably provides a list of, 20 plus cities. And then within that, you look at, the request for their recent proposals, you look at their amount spent on implementation versus cost for annual contract services. And already anecdotally provided some of that information on a spreadsheet that I'm keeping and documenting, just so I don't have to backtrack and go into it. But, if they replaced the system within the last 5 years. It's still usable, stuff like that. You get really good feedback from other IT directors around the state, as well as their finance and treasury type departments as well. So that's all part of the process.
Okay, thank you. And then my last question, it has to do with the staffing size. So typically, I know in the world of consulting that I come from, a lot of times we do a basic, like a medium, and then like a platinum. Or in other words, what is the must-have and what is the nice-to-have? Looking at those three different options, and I know one is the as-is state, and then the others are two potential 2Bs. So those two 2Bs, is one more, which one is more of must-have versus nice-to-have?
Yeah, I'll have to answer that because there's a change in circumstance, I would argue, with the federal funding that is coming our way. We have a chance to make this not a 7-year plan, but a much quicker plan. But to do that will require more staffing in terms of technology staffing to support a proper implementation.
Right.
But that's all going to be made feasible by that federal funding. If we don't, we decide which, if you look at our CARES Act spending, a big chunk of that was on technology improvements, as was referenced there, which is why we brought on kind of the part-time help desk technician to free up time for our existing staff to help out with all these implementations, because that's our number one barrier right now for getting things implemented. Well, one was cash. That's been resolved through the federal funding with CARES Act first and now this. And the second was just time from our existing staffing, because it's not just the IT project managers that you're bringing on, it's all the employees' times. They're doing their day-to-day jobs, and then now you're asking them to participate in a lot of work sessions to figure out, you know, what they're doing from a business process standpoint, what they need in terms of technology. But so I think both are going to be critical. So the help desk technician is going to be critical going forward because you can see we're already really, really far behind. We're below kind of minimum what's required for that. But because we're going to be doing a lot of software enhancements with this federal funding, likely, if we can stay consistent with what we did with CARES Act, I don't want to assume that that's what we'll do, but that's a big chunk of kind of the purpose of that funding, is to help you to digitize and have things done, you know, more remotely. If we do that, we're going to certainly need probably that systems analyst, kind of the business analysts, do more of the business process mapping to make sure that whatever vendor we go with, they understand what our business requirements are during the implementation process. So I think both of those are going to be critical simply because of that federal funding. If we weren't doing all these implementations, you know, I would say over the next year, still the technician would be, or help desk would be more critical. But even then, if we want to do a good ERP implementation, which we were planning to do, you know, maybe 2 years down the road, maybe now we want to start a little bit quicker. You're going to need to map things out properly before you do that. So I think they both become critical, but I think they're also both feasible now because of the incoming revenue sources that we may be getting we are getting from the federal government. We just need to figure out what kind of the guidelines are behind that funding.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Follow up?
No, that's
Okay. I'm going to hold off my questions till after I've had a chance to read the master plan. Councilmember Mensing?
Reading.
Riveting.
Thank you.
2 questions. When you say that you compare us to other local jurisdictions, your benchmarks, what metrics do you use to compare? Is it just population?
Actually, David, do you want to take that, actually? Because you do the financial.
Yeah, well, we make sure that, I mean, those are various populations, but all of those are agencies under 100,000 in population, but generally comparable in size. It's not a specific, not that various populations, staff size, departments, you're a full service city, so, there are differences in some of these numbers. So at the end of the day, though, they're numbers and their guidance, and then you analyze it for what does it mean and what are the implications for how you compare to the benchmark.
I will say it's very consistent with all other metrics. And when if you're going to compare us to like Falls Church, Fairfax City, City of Manassas, it is very comparable to the kind of all other metrics in terms of how understaffed, underpaid, underinvested we are in capital. And just kind of a side note, I know the last 3 years have looked bad, but I just want to, I guess, why we did that. Remember in FY18, we had just a budget mess. FY19, we had the debt spike. So literally we were cutting across the board on all government expenditures, and IT was one of those that took the hit. So it's not that we were failing ourselves. We just didn't have a choice at that point, but we realized that we were backwards technologically, and we have to address that, which is why we wanted to come up with the right roadmap going forward now that the financial position is improving to kind of tackle those problems. But we didn't just do it with technology, though. We did it with all capital. So we have a lot of issues throughout the city that we're paying for now because of kind of the hurdles that we had to deal with over the last few years. And on this as well, it's not just the report that we got. We also got some good spreadsheets with all these different initiatives, and could help us really make it easier for us to kind of plan for the CIP. So it was definitely a great effort to have on our part. But I just kind of wanted to remind the public about why we're not incompetent in terms of why we decided to invest that little in technologies. We literally had no choice over the last few years because we were in survival mode.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. My last question is for Chris. The website services that are limited, specifically we're lacking a mechanism for residents to report issues. Is our new website going to have that?
Yes. It's going to be provided by, Remember Dune Solutions, their smart government platform. It's essentially going to be SmartGov's module that's going to be provided through our website. But essentially, yes, they're going to be accessing our website to access SmartGov's technology, if that makes sense. They provide these kind of custom integrations, and that'll be a part of that. So if you want to log like a 311 type code, community maintenance type complaint, it'll be provided there. And then the system on the back end of that won't necessarily be somebody just tracking something in a spreadsheet and hope they get back to it. It will be like a comprehensive notification process, not only to those receiving the complaint, but also back to the citizen in real time. So it's going to be interesting to see kind of when we get that system up and running, what the potential of it actually is to address a lot of our city needs, especially for community maintenance, public engagement type stuff.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Councilmember Amaya.
No questions at this time.
Okay. Councilmember Moore, questions or comments?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. My first question, I guess either to Laszlo or Chris, does the scope of services for Client First include the development of the RFP for the ERP system? Will they be helping us draft the RFP?
So when we went originally to Client First, it was just for this IT master plan, of which it was to provide a weight of where we were and what kind of the hierarchy of needs were for the city from a technology standpoint. And then in that assessment, the glaring need, not only from our own understanding as a city from our ERP and when we need to do it, but who else provides this type of RP services? Now, Client First does not advocate for their own services, so that's a compliment to them. They've been really solid with just kind of sticking within the scope of work. Can they do it? Absolutely, and we'll look at that when we actually get to the actual RFP development process. But one thing that was really good about this technology master plan process was that I think it was like 115 item list of just processes that we currently lack. A lot of that has to do with our ERP. So in a sense, our own staff got to be able to document, and essentially in this case, a formal document, a lot of those business requirements that would also be captured in RFP. So there was a little bit of almost like a kickstart to it. So where we go from here and how we choose to go about developing that RFP, I do think that the benefit was that staff already had that conversation. They're going to be a lot more comfortable going into it. So.
Yeah, and you'll see in the FY.
Would you say that there's a need to have technical assistance with the drafting of the RFP?
Yeah,
it's a very technical document in order to get a really superior vendor. That's my question. Do you think they need it going forward?
Yeah, we actually had in the FY22 CIP, that's kind of part of so we're looking at the ERP as a multi-year program. Step one will be drafting that RFP, which we're recommending in the CIP to bring in some expertise on doing that, but then also the evaluation of the different vendors that are out there and capabilities, and then back to kind of their earlier point as well, kind of that systems analysis of business process mapping. Could we have afforded that this federal funding to kind of go all the way with that? Probably not. I think now we have an opportunity to do this right. We're already doing this much better than 2015, how that was done, but it can always be better to your point, Councilmember Hampton, there's the platinum strategies and other strategies. We have an opportunity to really go all in and make sure that we do this completely right with it. So I am recommending, and we're going to recommend that as part of the FY22 CIP and going forward, and now with the use of the federal funding available to us, that we do this the right way and we do get outside support for business process mapping, RFP development, vendor evaluation, and support for implementation. Because a lot of these vendors, they're kind of spread out thin in terms of customer service, so you don't always get it when you're doing these ERP implementations. They always kind of sell themselves very well in the upfront in terms of how they'll be there every step of the way. That's not always the case. It's always good to have an extra helping hand there to make sure that the implementation is done correctly.
That's very encouraging to hear, Leslie. My second question and final question, I haven't read the whole technology master plan, but I have a question about one of the things I saw in it. There was talk of a technology steering committee, I guess made up of city staff. Has that been formed, and if so, who's serving on it?
Thus far, no, we haven't actually assembled a specific technology steering committee. It's one of those best practices that, when we actually do have capacity and, I guess, willing participants is another one. But I do think as we start rolling out some of these new systems and those involved with those implementations, gaining some subject matter expertise, you can get a little bit of like a cultural buy-in of people getting more excited about the types of technologies that we're implementing. And I do think when you get there, you start asking for people to raise their hands in all of our departments, because we do want to have all cross-departmental participation in something like that. Then absolutely. We currently have an administration committee, a CIP committee, and an enforcement committee that I particularly oversee. This would just be another portfolio committee that I would help administer and let those involved kind of drive that technology steering committee.
Yeah, a lot of it's going to depend on our overall staffing level. So I hate to add too many kind of committee requirements to the department. So the admin committee is probably the best one right now to address it, because each department really only has one admin rep who's helping out with all different components of administration. For large organizations where you have kind of tech people in each department, that's who you would want, along with kind of the business side of it, participating in that. We don't have the capacity, so I'd hate to kind of duplicate. So for right now, the goal is just utilize the admin committee, and they can take on that function of kind of the technology steering committee, at least the mission, until our jurisdiction is large enough in terms of staffing to be able to support that and allow the departments to take on additional initiatives. But I think that admin committee should be suitable for the next few years.
Thank you. No more questions.
Okay. Councilmember Javed.
Yeah, really, I got let's take two questions here. Now we're using this across all departments. Do we need any, approval from the treasurer and commissioner of revenue?
Approval for what specific component? Are you talking about like the ERP?
The ERP, right.
Yeah.
If they're going to use our system, is there some type of approval system, or would they just be in compliance?
Well, you need their buy-in. Technically, you don't need so the governing body is kind of responsible for budgets, facilities, technology, things like that for those departments. But you certainly need their buy-in, and that was not done in 2015. We will make sure that is done in terms of this point, because the commissioner and treasurer are, besides, in addition to the finance department, those are going to be the three most important users of a new ERP, and you want all three to feel good with the specific systems that you're going with, that they understand how to utilize it, and they have buy-in. And I think with the current program we have in place with Chris's leadership working with those departments, I think we can get there.
And there will be no issue with information sharing
across the. Oh no, that's separate. That's a state legal barrier that that's something that we tried to change via state law a few years ago, to allow the finance director and the city manager to sign a non-disclosure agreement with the constitutional officer so we could share information. That was rejected in the state assembly. So there's still going to be those barriers in place that exist because of state law.
Second question, I guess, in regards to the budgeting, I guess, some of the functions like, the police department, what's it called, like the CAD system?
Yes, the computer audit.
Would that be in the system, or is it going to be in the, sorry.
Go ahead, Hasib.
Yeah, I was thinking it's like, like the Parks and Recs usage, is it going to be their budget? Police department will have a separate budget for the replacement of the CAD system? Or is this going to be encompassing under the general fund? How is this going to be split up?
It varies, but we try to allocate. So like the CAD, you see it right now in the CIP in the police section. There are other things. However, I would say that kind of oversight management has been centralized. Procurement has been centralized over the last few years. But certainly for budgeting, that's purely police. So we do want to show that in the police budget, but we can also shift it to an IT budget if that's what the governing body prefers, is to keep all kind of technology initiatives, kind of like what we're doing with fleet, except for specialized fleet. We've kept that within each department, but the kind of white fleet we've combined under a fleet section. We can do something similar in IT, but the CAD is specific to police, and that's why we've kept that there.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Banks?
Hi. Thank you for the presentation. I looked at your slide of the recommendations, and you had on there the cybersecurity as well as the improvements to the SCADA system. Now, I remember just a month ago there was a locality in Florida that had their water treatment facility hacked, their SCADA system hacked, and the hacker increased the pollutants or the chemicals in the water treatment facility to make it almost toxic for the citizen. And it was actually an employee who caught it before the water was distributed to the citizens. I mean, that's a serious thing. And when I see these two combinations, I think of that Florida incident last month. You recall what I'm mentioning that happened in Florida?
Sure.
Can you go over this, the importance of replacing and improving our SCADA system?
Well, to refer to what actually happened in Florida is there was a remote access software package that's commonly used called TeamViewer that was not secured. And these network improvements, part of these network improvements is to improve security and require multi-factor authentication. So something you have and something you own, just like you would when you access your cell phone or your bank. They say, hey, is it really you? Kind of thing. So that's all included in this recommendation, right? And that's across the board. That's not just for, right now it's for SCADA. It's also for police. It's required by federal regulation. And as we roll out new applications, that'll be required across the board.
Thanks. And my final question is this. On slide 25, when you talk about the ticket times, was that assessment taken before or was it after the hiring of our part-time help desk technician?
Before.
Okay.
I don't have new numbers since the part-time help desk person is that. Yeah.
Thanks. I think that's all for my questions.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. I want to thank the two gentlemen from Client First, and thank you very much, Chris. And I really do look forward to reading the master plan. We'll just have to read it in the morning.
Have some coffee.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, don't read it at night. It won't come in.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Unless you really want to go to sleep.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Take care.
And next we have update on Phase 3. And I think that's Laszlo.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Give me 1 second here to bring up the slides. Okay, can everyone at home see this?
I'd like to see it.
Okay, great, thank you. So I'll try to be brief here. I don't want to keep everyone waiting too long, but I do have a quick update on what's happening with the Phase 3 downtown related to the construction here. Okay. So as part of the work, as you all recall, Park Center Court is going to completely be reconstructed, as will all the kind of the utilities and everything else. Everything's going to be upgraded, and everything really in Phase 1A from the edge of Park Center Court all the way down to the railroad tracks you're going to have massive amount of earthwork and a lot of things happening there from an infrastructure standpoint. So in order for them to be able to do that, Park Center Court is going to have to be shut down during the construction period. When I say Park Center Court, I don't mean like the intersection part with Manassas Drive. I just mean essentially from this point back towards City Hall and the other properties. That section will be closed. In order to enable that, we do have this other road where you can get access coming from either the western half of our city by turning left here into the City Hall parking lot, or from the eastern side of the city. Once you cross the tracks, you pass Park Center Court and you can turn right in here. And then to get out right now, the issue is you can only turn right. So all those who need to go back to the eastern half of our city on the other side of the tracks, they wouldn't be able to do that right now. So what's going to be done is this median here is going to be temporarily altered to allow for those vehicles to be able to turn left for this brief period of time. And as you can see here, there's going to be signage placed for pedestrians because this whole crosswalk will have to be shut down for that period of time as well. So there's going to be signage here directing people to walk down to this intersection, and signage here directing them to use essentially this detour crosswalk for pedestrians. Timelines for this happening. So the work is going to start on April 20, for Park Center Court will be closed on April 22nd of 2021 to June 1st, 2022. Almost a 14-month period, but really a 13.5-month period of time. So that's a lot of time for construction to occur, but that June timeframe, July timeframe, that's when Phase 1A will be complete. So you're talking about a year-long project. That's a pretty quick build out of half of the Phase 3 development. For the median improvements to enable that work to happen will start on April 8th. So you will see construction and you'll see in the next slide kind of what the impact will be to traffic while they do that. But you will see construction starting on the median on April 8th. Likely, these are projections right now, but that's the most likely, completed by April 21st to allow the road Park Center Court to be shut on April 22nd. Once they're done June 1st, no later than by July-ish of 2022 is when the median will be restored back to its former condition. So you can see while the median work is being done, you are going to have impacts to the lanes here. So we are going to have to put this out in the public as well, or signs as well, just saying that there's going to be an impact. So you're going to have one lane closed in this area for westbound traffic, and then you're going to have an impact lane closure here for eastbound, and then it goes towards the left turn lane. You're going to have an impact as well, trying to get in and out of Park Center Court for that 3-week period. So you are going to have some traffic disruptions to get in and out of City Hall for that 3-week period for our residents. Not so much for those who are coming from the eastern half of the track, but mainly for those who are coming from the west. It's going to be disrupted. They'll be able to turn left here, but it's going to be a tight fit where everyone's going to be directed to one lane in this section. That's going to cause a little bit of traffic for that 3-week period as well in the morning for everyone heading westbound to get to 28 with one lane here, then everyone coming home in the evening. You're going to condense to one lane for this brief period of time. So that will cause some traffic disruptions. Again, the rationale for doing this, Park Center Court, there's going to be a lot of work done on there. That's where all the kind of the key utility lines come through for this development. So there's going to be a lot of utility work being done along Park Center Court, a lot of electrical, telecom utilities as well, realignment of the road a little bit as well, of the curb and gutter, the regrading work that has to be done. They're going to have to essentially adjust it right now. That all the topography is off between Phase 1A and Phase 1B. If you go outside right now, you can see kind of the dramatic differences. Everything's kind of going to be leveled out now.
with this construction, so a lot of movement of dirt. That's one of the key drivers of the cost increases that we saw over the last couple of months. The brick paving, the overall paving, the crosswalks, and the final touch of putting the brick layer on top and the asphalt as well for the other section. So there's a lot of work to be done over the next year or so. And that I just wanted to provide that update. And again, we're gonna have to share this information with the community, but I wanted to first brief you all up and the community who may be watching right now on this impact to traffic and impact to flow in and out of City Hall for the next year while we get new City Hall, which will be much better for flow because now you're gonna have multiple ways in and out of that future building. Any questions on this part before I get to the next?
Thank you. Let's start with our folks at home. Councilmember Moore.
I have no question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Javed?
Yeah, there's one question that about the entrance to the City Hall. I don't think it's big enough to have two cars be there side by side.
Well, no, so you're absolutely, so yes, for the different directions there is, so there's enough room for a car pulling in and a car pulling out, but you're absolutely right. You're gonna have to make that left turn from this right lane. But that's the
Car
case.
coming in from the east side.
What's that?
The car coming out, like there'll be enough space for two cars to go in and out at the same time?
Yes, so for two cars, there's enough space for one to go in and one to go out. But you don't have, ideally, you would want to have three widths here, one for right turn, one for left turn. But it is consistent, like with Bank Street, you have kind of the same situation. And then further down the street and exiting Park 170 on the far eastern side, you kind of have a similar situation as well. But it's not ideal, but again, it's just a temporary problem that we're going to be facing here for the next year.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Vice Mayor Banks?
No questions. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Hampton?
Just a quick question about making the left-hand turn as if you're heading towards the tracks. Is there any concern about folks having sufficient time to get in between traffic? Because it can be pretty nasty sometimes.
It's going to be difficult in the morning, right? So the good thing is when business or City Hall really picks up is usually after the rush in the morning. The afternoon, that's where I think you're going to have a lot of issues when you're having cars driving back this way, those who are getting out of City Hall trying to turn left. It is going to be problematic. So if it becomes a huge issue, we may have to utilize an officer to help kind of direct traffic. So to stop cars and allow others to flow out if we see things backing up during those peak hours.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Mensing?
Yeah, my question piggybacks off that. Is there going to be enough space if you're turning left to kind of go halfway, stop where the median used to be, and then continue? It can be really difficult to see up the hill.
Well, yeah.
No?
You'll probably end up blocking a lane.
Oh, okay.
And people kind of.
Well, no, I meant without blocking a lane.
Yeah, no, I think the back of your vehicle will likely, I don't think that median is wide enough to.
Okay.
You meant like a refuge area?
Right, yeah.
Okay, okay.
I certainly think SUVs and others will have problems with that. So you're gonna, when you turn, you almost have to commit that you're gonna be going. So it's, again, it can be done when traffic is minimal, but to your point, it's gonna be a difficult situation during rush hours. Morning, again, we don't have a lot of traffic usually in City Hall, but those afternoon hours, especially when it's like utility billing, daytime, or personal property tax season, that's where, yes, we're gonna have to have officers posted there to help, because we get a lot of customers coming in and they're staying usually past 5 o'clock, and the treasurer usually stays open to accommodate as many people, but you're getting people kind of rushing out at that point.
I'm also concerned about visibility looking up the hill, because once people get the green light at the top of the hill, they go pretty fast.
Yeah.
I'm convinced they're not going 25, so it could be that you thought it was clear.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be an issue. I'm just not sure what other kind of solution, because we have to shut down parks. Like a lot of construction is going to occur on Park Center Court. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Councilman.
Well, just make it only right turn only.
We could.
Yeah.
We
And then
could.
you
It's just
turn
gonna
at
be
the
very
light.
disruptive.
Yeah.
We can say right turn only or prohibit left turns during certain times. But I think you can make the left turn there when there's not a lot of traffic. I mean, I've always wanted to when I go out there, because I usually go back the other side as well. I'm like, I can make this happen. So it can happen, but right now it's not structured to allow for left turn.
Yeah.
I have no questions.
No questions? Okay, thank you very much, Laszlo. Thank you.
Now, on a brighter note here, so ribbon cutting ceremony.
The one more thing.
Sure.
It just came to my mind. A traffic light on the, I guess, near the intersection on Market Street.
Yes.
Can that be like during rush hour time, like you know how they have the blinking red light or green light to give continuous traffic for during peak times?
So you're talking about like along Manassas Drive, just keeping it.
Yeah, along Manassas Drive. If you're going, up towards 28, the traffic light at the intersection could be, blinking yellow, right? And then the other two will be blinking red. So it's meaning there's no stop, but the Manassas Drive has the right of way.
You could do that, but you're gonna make it difficult for the Market Street people and the people in Artena to get on the map. I think once Connor Drive is more usable, I think that could be an option, but there are a lot of people that are pulling out from Market Street, and if they're at a stop, they're never going to be able to get out onto Manassas Drive if they just have a stop sign, because there's too many cars on Manassas Drive in those rush hour periods. But I get your point. It would help kind of speed up the flow. But I think if we can get a good alternative option with Connor Drive, that may be an option in the future during those peak periods where we're directing people, we're trying to encourage people who live in Park 170 or 10 and the other apartments that are going to be built there, take Connor Drive to get to 28, don't go on Manassas Drive, and let's improve kind of the flow along Manassas Drive. I think that's a good option at that point.
Okay.
So good news, we're talking about construction here and having closed Park Center Court for a reason, because we're starting to construct the new downtown. So we'd like to do a ribbon cutting ceremony when you're going to start seeing fencing and other stuff already being put up. You see a little bit of like flagging and other stuff being put up right now, but you're going to see more of that here over the next month. But we'd like to hold a small, COVID-19 safe ribbon cutting ceremony mid to late April. And the time we're looking at is 9:30 to 10 a.m. A small contingent of media is going to be invited, and I would like to invite not just the governing body, but also the Planning Commission and EDA, since they've all been part of this over 1 year now at this point, long process of getting us to this point. So for tonight, I really just kind of want to glean from you all, or you don't have to answer tonight, but maybe we can follow up with the emails, kind of what your preferences are for days around that mid to late April timeframe, so I can share that with the developer.
So we should send you our availability?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, we'll do.
I'll try to pick a day where the majority of people, governing bodies are available, and then we can share that with the Planning Commission.
Okay, sure enough, thank you. Okay.
That's all I had for this information.
Okay, thank you, Laszlo. Moving on to recognition. Tonight we have a resolution formally recognizing the teen recreation leaders for their outstanding service to the city and to the youth at the community center. Whereas the governing body of the City of Manassas Park are extremely grateful for the great services provided to our community by all of our employees, and whereas the governing body desires to recognize outstanding performance of our employees as they accomplish important projects, innovate solutions, and/or are recognized by residents and/or partners in our community and region for their outstanding work, and whereas the teen recreation leaders at Parks and Recreation, Daniel Grant, Hannah Green, Maggie Johnson, Marisol Hernandez-Gonzalez, and Nathan Morgan, alerted the Manassas Park Police of a suspicious individual preying on female juveniles at the community center. Whereas, due to their training and intuition, they exemplified their commitment to keeping the community center a safe place for all youth, and by doing so, they helped prevent further inappropriate behaviors. Whereas all 5 staff members have fostered a safe, welcoming, and inclusive environment for the youth of Manassas Park to socialize and participate in recreation activities in the teen center. Whereas the staff have shown great dedication, compassion, and a positive mentorship for the youth of Manassas Park and their families. Now therefore be it resolved that the governing body hereby recognizes the great service and accomplishments of Daniel Grant, Hannah Green, Maggie Johnson, Marisol Hernandez Gonzalez, and Nathan Morgan of the Parks and Recreation Department of Manassas Park. Be it further resolved that these employees are awarded with a Performance Spotlight Award certificate for their outstanding service by the governing body and signed by both the mayor and the city manager of Manassas Park. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Abstained? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Would our Director of Public Works, Parks and Rec, Jay Swisher, like to say a few words? Thank you.
Mayor, members of the governing body. So,
Okay, I thought you were.
Daniel, Hannah, Maggie, Marisol, and Nate have been with the department for quite some time. During that time, they've made a number of meaningful contributions while they've been with us. But the awareness and the intuition, the focus that they exhibited during a pretty, potentially dangerous and serious situation will undoubtedly, leave a lasting impact on all those involved. So certainly, we're very grateful for the swift and decisive action that they took, kind of navigating that difficult situation, but also very grateful for everything they do on a daily basis to make our department better all around.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Can we do a picture opportunity?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, sure, thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, Jay.
You pull your team up, and if you don't mind, like a picture.
Oh, okay. Do you want, how about the whole governing body? Yeah.
The girls are stuck here.
All right. Been sitting all day.
Thank you. We're so proud of all of you. Thank you. I hate to say this, maybe it's
Well on that.
One, two, three, more. Yes.
Doesn't matter.
Thank you for protecting the young lives.
Thank
Okay.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Yes. And thank you again. We're so proud of you. Very.
You too.
Good night. Okay, we have no presentations. Moving on to consent agenda. Consent agenda consists of the approval of the minutes of March 2nd, 2021, recommendation to the Circuit Court for the appointment of Mr. Tyler Vaughn to the Board of Zoning Appeals, recommendation to the Circuit Court for the appointment of Mr. Anthony Thomas to the Board of Equalization, and amendment to Ordinance 21-1700-1071 to add Mr. Dustin Walker as a years of service recipient. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, moving on to, we have no unfinished business, so moving on to new business. 9A would be fire and rescue EMS equipment maintenance contract. Welcome, Chief.
Or if you don't mind, before I step into agenda 9A, I'd like to step off script for just 1 second. And I'd like to give a sincere thank you to the mayor. I know I sent you an email saying thank you for your assistance with getting to Delegate Rome in our time of need for the support letter for our safer grant. So for those not understand what we're talking about is, the fire department just put together a federal grant for new employees. It's 100% funded. So we felt that need would be to get a support letter from Delegate Rome and then all of our other representatives. So I sent a letter to Dana. Didn't get a response back for a week. Reached out to the city manager in the meeting that Wednesday morning. He says, reach out to the mayor. I get to sure help you. Sent the mayor an email on Wednesday afternoon. She immediately went to work. And by Thursday morning, I was starting to get correspondence back from Delegate Rome. Our deadline for the grant was Friday. So we didn't think it was good to let her with her work. The letter came on Friday. So that letter was submitted with our grant. So thank you personally from the fire department.
Oh, Mark.
That showed me truly what leadership of the city is all about. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Good luck, by the way, too. The grant. Yeah.
It's going to be a highly competitive grant. So, but I do believe that letter is going to truly help us. It was a very well put together letter. So thank you to Delegate Rome as well it was a quick turnaround. So agenda 9A basically is going to be a consolidation of a maintenance service agreement for the fire department. Currently, we use Stryker for our EMS equipment, which is cardiac monitors, light AEDs, Lucas devices, which are the CPR devices that put in the chest, our stretchers, and a couple other EMS items. So currently, all those items are being maintenance once a year. Well, we have them on separate contracts, all under Stryker. So our goal is to put them all under one service agreement. So when it comes time for accounting, we're looking and going, so we take this one, which one is this one? Which one is this one? And by putting them all under one contract, instead of having 4 or 5 different contracts, the rep from Stryker can give us a 15% savings, which is going to save us over $8,000. So annually, we're going to get about $11,000, $11,428. Over 4 years, it's going to be $45,713.43. So when we did our FY22 submission to the city manager about a month ago, we already incorporated that $11,428 in there, hoping that it was going to get approved. If it's not, we'll take that number out, put the old number back in. But this is going to allow us to truly consolidate things under one consolidated agreement. The city attorney reviewed all those agreements in the past. We took that verbiage, added it to the new consolidated contract, and that's currently the dean. So our staff recommendation would be to allow the governing body to approve the city manager to sign the consolidated Stryker service agreement for the fire department, pending final review from the city attorney.
Okay. Well, let's go for some questions, maybe. Councilmember Amaya, do you have any comments or questions?
No questions at this time, no.
Councilmember Mensing?
No questions, that's great.
I have none. Councilmember Hampton?
Believe it or not, I actually don't have any questions tonight. But I did look up each and every single one of those pieces of devices on YouTube to see what they did. So that helped. Thank you.
Councilmember Moore?
No question. Thank you.
Councilmember Javed?
No questions here.
Okay, thank you. Vice Mayor Banks?
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you. The recommended staff motion is that the governing body authorize city manager to negotiate and sign a consolidated service contract with Stryker that incorporates Stryker's proposal as presented, subject to final city attorney review. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion carries. Thank you, Chief, very much. Yeah, you too. Okay, moving on to 9B, which is amendment to the mowing agreement with Waworka.
It's going to be Calvin.
Good evening, everyone. This is Calvin Odell, the Director of Community Development. A little over a year ago, we entered into contract with WeWorka for all of our mowing of publicly held lands and right-of-ways. This year, when it was time to extend the contract, they requested an increase in the contract amount. They've had a year now to be out there in the field. They realized they were investing far more time than they anticipated, especially with the right-of-way mowings. So they asked for an 18.8% increase. There was no mechanism in the contract to accommodate such an increase. So the contract has lapsed, but the 18.8% increase appears to certainly be justified, and that still brings them in $2,000 lower than the next highest bidder. So staff wanted to entertain re-entering into contract with WeWorka and allowing a mechanism to go into place where they could request annual increases based on either a CPI or a 2% flat rate per year. Again, staff evaluated the cost the cost that WeWorka proposed and what that would mean if we were to go back out to bid, and it looks like that they would still be coming in as low bidder even with this increase. And we certainly would get a similar complaint or request for increase from any other vendor in the same position. They're going to want an annual increase to cover inflation, especially with gas prices on the rise. So staff recommendation is that we go ahead and sign the amendment that Dean has prepared, which will reinvigorate the agreement itself, and we'll actually change the mechanism to extend the agreement that will adjust prices, including CPI or 2% adjustments in the future extensions.
And just to clarify, so Alan did reach out back to them, and they were okay with the 2%. And so I think that makes a lot more sense for many reasons, but one being for an administrative reason as well.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's do questions. Thank you, Calvin. Councilmember Javed, comments or questions?
No questions.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Moore.
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Banks.
No questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Hampton.
Quick question. I believe I read that the school system uses that same service. Do we get any discount or any consideration since it's the same jurisdiction spending money with them?
Calvin, any idea?
No, I don't think we get any discount other than the fact that we work as a local company. It's probably why they were able to come in as a low bidder in the first place. They are local, so that keeps them, right near home base for all these operations. But no, I don't think there's any. If I understand the question correctly, I don't think there's any consideration to the schools and the city having the same contract.
Okay, thank you for answering my question. Thank you.
Thank you. I have no questions. Councilmember Mensing?
No questions. No questions.
Okay. There are no more further questions. Staff recommendation is that the governing body authorize the city manager to negotiate and sign either an amendment to the existing contract with WeWorka for mowing services or a new agreement with WeWorka if deemed necessary that revises the provisions for annual renewal, has a maximum term of 4 years, and incorporates new pricing as presented, subject to final review by city attorney. Do we have a motion?
Moved.
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed, abstained, motion carries. Thank you, Calvin. Moving on to 9C. The next item is a discussion of the implementation of House Bill 2318. For the folks at home, I'll go ahead and provide a little bit of background for this agenda item. There was an issue brought to the attention of the city by residents, and it was an issue of vehicles being test-driven in an unsafe manner on residential streets. So the city's goal was to try to address this in the interests of community safety and also compliance with traffic law. Our state representative, Delegate Danica Rome, carried the legislation for the city in the Virginia General Assembly, and she was very successful. It passed. Delegate Rome was in constant contact with all stakeholders, and we are very pleased that the Virginia Automobile Dealers Association spoke in favor of the legislation. The Virginia Municipal League spoke in favor of this also, and actually there was no one who spoke against it. So now we have the enabling legislation available to us to allow the city to amend city code to address the issue of unsafe test driving and to increase speeding fines in designated residential areas. So this could be one more tool in our toolbox to try to address community safety and also to increase compliance with existing traffic law. So discussion this evening will determine if there's a consensus within the governing body to go forward with amending code to accommodate this change. And I think staff probably has some more detailed information for us. Dean, do you have some?
I mean, I could just go, once, if the code is amended, then of course our police would enforce with the higher tickets. Mm-hmm. And then secondly, if there's repeated violators, then again, I'll report them to the Virginia Dealer Board as we try to do before, which got us to this place as well. So that's really all I have from an implementation standpoint, but in reality, it's really a code amendment that needs to happen.
And our goal was not to be punitive in any way. Our goal was to increase compliance with traffic law. It was for safety reasons and so on. So thank you, Dean.
Yeah, I just want to point out that in order to do this, we have to also implement the increased fines in the residence districts. It's $250 on top of the regular speeding fines. So we won't be able to take advantage of that unless we also implement that. So that's going to be a separate discussion probably, but right now there's one area of the city that's been a big problem. There might be others as well. Mm-hmm. But bear in mind, each one of them have to have that residence district established as well. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I can't speak for everyone on the governing body, but I've received comments and complaints regarding almost the entire length of Manassas Drive. There is speeding and people are complaining about that. So this would in some way alleviate that, would it not?
Well, so we have the ability to establish the residence districts without also prohibiting the drivers or the test drivers from using it. So if the speeding's a problem elsewhere in the city, just go ahead and do the residence districts. That would increase the fines and hopefully stop that. The one area in the city that's been a problem for the test driving is Manassas Drive, north of the Andrew Drive and Signal View Drive intersection. So I think they're two separate issues, but they're kind of related.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And did you mention that to be designated residential, it had to be 70% or more? Is that correct? What was the?
Take a 300-foot stretch of road, and 70% or greater of the buildings there have to be residence buildings.
Okay.
So there's a 300-foot stretch that is all commercial. You don't break it up. So on Manassas Drive, it caused a little bit of a problem because we have everything from Andrew west over to Mathis. There's little pockets of non-residential, so it'd be kind of awkward to set up a residence district all the way along there because you'd have to stop, have little breaks and say, you're leaving residence district, entering. So I think we probably want to just focus on everything from Mathis west and Andrew north on Manassas Drive.
Mathis west to the boundary of Manassas Park.
Probably, yeah. I mean,
okay.
It's a problem. I don't know if it's primarily all up and along Manassas Drive or just from like Polk to Mathis, people cutting through there down Old Centerville Road. I'm not sure what the problem is, but I'm sure the police could give you a pretty good idea of where the issues are.
If you want to stay there, Dean, there might be legal questions. Okay. Councilmember Hampton?
So I have a question. Will we need to put up signs? Because there's a part in okay, so it'd be like that part in Fairfax City where when you go off of Route 50 by the TD Bank, they have signs up that says no test driving in this neighborhood.
Oh, I didn't know that, but.
Just because I cut through there.
We have to warn people.
Okay.
And we also have to send notices to the dealers in the city, that are based in the city, let them know as well.
Okay. So those signs would be permanent, or they would just be like the one-time signs that we have up every now and then?
No, they would have to be permanent.
Okay. Thank you.
And that's a good point, because we do also have to send a letter from the city notifying our dealers that we're now doing this. That's before we can report them to the dealer board. You have to submit that letter to them.
So is it just the dealers that are here in Manassas Park, but are they also the ones over on Mathis Avenue?
Well, we can only do it with the ones in Manassas Park.
Okay.
Legislation's currently written. Maybe next year, if it becomes an issue, we can ask for some revisions to the legislation.
But the signs will be pretty much a deterrent.
Right, and they're also, so, they're still going to have the enhanced fines. So
Yeah.
this here says that we can, so if we go to the state board and let them know that a dealer is not notifying the test drivers, the state will then impose fines. Okay, we don't fine the dealers themselves. So there's a process, but we will stop the speeders, all speeders, not just the test drivers. So it's still going to have a benefit no matter what.
Okay.
My understanding from trying to shepherd this through the process was that if the legislation were to have been written any more stringently, it wouldn't have passed.
Okay.
Yeah. So do you have any questions or comments?
No questions.
Okay.
None right now.
Okay. Councilmember Moore?
I do have a clarification question. Dean, is this for speeders that are just test driving vehicles with a higher fine would apply, or any speeder?
It would be any speeder. So it's kind of a two-part. This thing deals directly with the dealers themselves. And so we can go ahead and notify dealers that we have these special areas that they're not allowed to let people test drive. And they're supposed to notify those people. You can't go over here. Now, meanwhile, I think it was the state dealer board that asked for the requirement that we have the enhanced fines also in the residence districts. And so meanwhile, even if there aren't test drivers going there, if there are speeders there, they're still going to get the enhanced fines, even if they aren't test drivers.
And is that 250 above the regular fine for speeding?
Yes, it is. It's a pretty big hit.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Javed?
Yeah, I have no question. I think Dean answered my question via email and tonight as well. I think the first step is to designate it as a residential high increased fine zone, and then go from there. I'm for taking the next step if we're taking the consensus right.
Okay, thank you. Vice Mayor Banks?
No questions. I'm for it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So, and that's next, so that we don't waste staff time, we would need to get a consensus to go forward. So Councilmember Javed is in favor of it. Vice Mayor Banks is in favor. Councilmember Moore, are you in favor of going forward?
Yes.
Okay.
Let's go forward.
Thank you. Councilmember Hampton?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
Yes.
Unanimous. Thank you very much, folks. Yeah. So we'll proceed. Okay, manager's report.
Nothing to report.
Okay, thank you. Next, we go into closed session. So Dean, do you want to read us into closed session?
Well, I recommend we go into closed meeting to discuss a prospective business pursuant to paragraph 5, subsection 2.2-3711A. That's right.
Do we have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. We'll go into